that's where a lot of discussion about college has morphed is, can I get a job? I think that there's a bigger question to be asking. I mean, getting a job is important, obviously, but I think there's a bigger question to be asked, and that is, are you well established in the faith? If you really can't answer that with a resounding yes, I would say go to a Christian college and get well established in the scriptures and in a biblical worldview.
And welcome to Calvary Conversations. I am your main host today, Tim Hange, the chair of the English department at Calvary University. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Sean LePage, who is in ministry studies at Calvary University, Mike Dodds, who's also in leadership at ministry studies at Calvary University, and Josh Paxton, who heads up our intercultural studies and general coolness department. So it is, sorry, it's great to have you guys here today. And this is kind of could be a provocative question. Should Christians go to college? And if so, where and why? So we recognize, first of all, that this topic is kind of a weird one for us to address because it could be really self-serving, right? We all work for a Christian university. We're pretty committed to our careers and our ministries here. So on the one hand, I just want to say, fair warning to our audiences, there is some degree to which I guess we can't be fully objective in this, right? But we are. What I appreciate about my co-hosts is that they're pretty intellectually fair-minded people, and we really like to sit here and dissect the issues. And we are going to try to be as objective and even-handed about this one as we possibly can. And I think this is a great question for people to be addressing at a number of levels. Because, yes, it's important for you if you're a young person considering what your next steps are out of high school. It's important for you as a parent advising that young person. But it's also important for those of us in Christian leadership in our communities to know how to better partner with or support or recommend next steps, Christian organizations and next steps to people who are pursuing education at Christian colleges. So I'm going to start with the very first question, which is, for a Christian young person graduating from high school, should Christian college simply be, or Christian university simply be, the right next step? What do you think?
I'll jump in here. I think that it depends on the student, and I think it depends not on their intelligence or that kind of thing, but on their preparedness. And I say that as I'm talking about their preparedness as a disciple of Jesus. So some churches do a really good job of preparing young people for adulthood and for college or whatever's after high school. But we've talked about this in previous programs, and we've looked over polling and surveys and this kind of thing, and the outlook isn't very positive. Actually, the picture is that, generally speaking, churches aren't doing a great job of preparing students for the challenge to their faith that they're going to experience in college. So, my question to a student or parents asking this question would be, how well grounded are you in the biblical worldview, or to use more biblical language, how well established are you in the faith? And so, if your student, if you as a high school graduate are, cannot say that you have a really good handle on on the faith, and if you say you looked at the letters of Paul and could tell us very little about what say the Apostle Paul considered to be a mature Christian, then I would recommend to you that either You latch on to somebody through your church that will put you through a fairly rigorous training program to get you well established in the faith before you go off to college, or that you come to a Christian college like Calvary University that that will help you get grounded in the biblical worldview. I would say that would, not that you're going to necessarily be trained for a job uh, by this process, because that's where a lot of discussion about college has morphed. Is, can I get a job? I think that there's a bigger question to be asking. I mean, getting a job is important, obviously, but I think there's a bigger question to be asked, and that is, are you well established in the faith? If you really can't answer that with a resounding yes, I would say go to a Christian college and get well established in the scriptures and in a biblical worldview.
Very good. Very good.
I'm gonna jump in on Sean at the end. You mentioned the church. I'd mentioned the parents, and we're saying that you said that as well. When you asked the question, Tim, my first thought was, know your child. There's a verse we use in the Proverbs: train up a child in the way he should go. I don't know that this is exactly how we should apply it, but it's a principle. So I'll use the principle, even though the verse might have another meaning. Do I know my children? We sort of default with the culture at times. And I think this is one where, boy, everybody's got to go to college. There's a job thought with it, whether that's true or not. But do they really need to go to college? Here, I put children through college, and now I'm looking at my grandkids, and I was thinking of one of them in particular. So when we started this discussion, she came to mind because my instant response is, no, she doesn't know herself. She doesn't know where she's going in life. So that's anecdotal, but know your child. That's a number of things. What are they interested in? What are they good at? What is their spirituality? Like Sean, you're talking there. And then that puts you down another road that you need to be at. I think sometimes we as parents sort of default, sure, go to college because I had a good training. Do you know your school? We got to ask that anymore. I mean, that's 20 years ago that I was at school, and schools change.
Yeah.
I like that, Mike, the emphasis on knowing yourself. And, that's one of the reasons why gap years have been a very popular thing for people to do out of high school, is to just go out, either spend some time working, go on a trip, do some kind of, for Christians, maybe some kind of ministry opportunity, etc., and take some time to grow before taking that next step. And, Tim, you asked the question, should attending a university simply be a given? And if I'm answering that question directly, I'd say no, it shouldn't, because there's so many different contextual factors that might play into a particular person and an individual, their setting, their finances, their situation, what their goals may or may not be. And all of those things need to be considered in what the next step might be. And I think it's also important to understand that, that doesn't necessarily mean no, never. When in talking about going to a university or whatever, right? That might mean wait a year. That might mean wait 2 years. Work a job for 4 years so that you can save up enough money to be able to pay for it and not gather a whole bunch of debt, right? I think we seem to have a mindset sometimes of, well, if I'm going to do it, I got to do it now. So I got to hurry through and everything.
Right.
But that may not be the right next step. So,
especially as we look at the cost of education right now, I mean, one would have to say we need to factor in even biblical stewardship here, because it's okay to spend. Look, when the average, income was say 10 to 15,000 a year, and college cost $1,000 a semester, well, that was less than 10% of a yearly income. Okay, you could blow that on letting your son or daughter find themselves, or figure out, spend a couple of semesters figuring out what it is they wanted to do. Right now, spending a couple semesters figuring out what you want to do is about a $30,000 student loan bill. Right. I mean, and that's on the good side of things at a lot of Christian universities. So, is it really worth it to spend that if you don't know what you're one? I have a son who just went back to college at the age of 24. He spent that 1 year and he said, "Look, I don't want to rack up student loans." He spent 1 year out of high school. He said, "I don't want to rack up student loans if I don't really know this is what I want to do." So he
Mhm.
worked for a few years and figured things out, got some maturity under him, and now he's back and he knows exactly what he wants to do. So I think we have to factor that in, guys. Like I don't think it's the same decision that it was when you and I graduated from high school.
I agree.
And
I'm going to use a different illustration. Way back, I'm retired military, and it used to be for young men, in particular at that time, send them into the military. They should go into the military after high school because that'll calm them
Great
down,
idea.
give them some
idea.
responsibility.
yeah,
I don't
Discipline.
say that anymore.
yeah,
The government's changed, military's changed a little bit, and people are different. The different attitudes toward that and all the rest. So shoot, you can't do a cookie cutter.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's look at two groups of people. I'll ask about. Let's first take the group of Christian young people who aren't necessarily preparing for ministry. Okay, they're interested in information technology or going into medicine, accounting, business. All of these. There are a whole bunch of fields out there, or engineering, let's say. And let's say they're looking at their university options and they're saying, well, really the best universities in these fields are not necessarily Christian. They're secular universities. I mean, uh, so yeah, I've got a list of universities. I won't name names, or they're high on medicine or engineering or tech. Uh, what would you advise them as a Christian young person considering going to a secular university? Is this a bad idea? When is it a bad idea? When might it be a good idea? Because we understand these issues are complex and very dependent on the person. But I think this is where maybe our voice can be a voice of wisdom here, advising people when might it be a bad idea and when might it be a fine idea to consider a secular program somewhere.
I hate to be a broken record, Tim, but I was about to say it's really going to depend on the person.
Yeah.
It's really going to depend on, it's going to depend on their spiritual growth, their maturity. Are they consistently walking with the Lord? Are they in the Word on a regular basis? Have they surrounded themselves with a good Christian support network? Maybe another question in that would be, are there Christian alternatives? Maybe they're not the, quote unquote first choice information technology school out there, but they would be good enough and not necessarily require you to check your faith at the door and going. Another thought that popped into my head was with the proliferation of online education today, maybe you could take some classes online from that particular school, but not necessarily live there and expose yourself to the rest of the environment.
I agree, Josh, and I would add this, that that very often people overestimate how strong their faith is. Like we've looked at a discipleship study called the National Study on Disciple Making in U.S. Churches, and what this study found was that pastors are overly optimistic in their assessment of their disciple making culture in their church. And so if the pastors are overestimating how well they're doing with their people, then how much more are the rest of us overestimating preparedness? And so I think we can't ignore the statistics, and there's differing opinions on this about what exactly that number is, but somewhere around 7 or 8, even if we are more generous when we say 6 to 8 out of every 10 Christians who go to college are walking away from the faith at some point. We can't ignore that statistic, that there's something wrong here, and people are overestimating their ability to handle what's going on in the universities. Not every university is Marxist and completely anti-Christianity and anti-American or whatever, but a lot of them are. And you just don't know for sure what you're going to be getting into. So so I do agree with Josh that it depends on the person and their preparedness. And so I would say that, the answer is still the same. Are you in a community that can help you navigate the challenges of a university?
Yeah,
Sean, what you remind me is about is sort of the application of the Dunning-Kruger effect to Christianity. And for those not familiar, the Dunning-Kruger effect is basically research that demonstrates that the people who will state that they are the most competent at something are generally not nearly as competent as people who would say, "Well, I'm not as skilled in this area as I need to be or as I'd like to be." Typically, those people are actually more skilled. The more confidence he has, like First Corinthians, what is it, 10? Take heed if you think you stand, lest you fall. I mean, the Bible had a handle on this already well before that research. But if you are sitting there thinking, "Oh no, I'm strong in my faith," heed the warning of the Dunning-Kruger research. It is highly likely that you are in that group of people who think that you know more about apologetics and know more about how to defend your faith than you really do. Because this is something that I think all of us at our age have seen a lot of young people going off to college and coming back and abandoning their faith completely. Um, it's interesting you say, Sean, too, that not every university. What about somebody who says, well, Christians make a big deal. It's all political. This whole thing, they got all upset about universities, and their liberal nature. It's just a secular university. I mean, there's probably some of that, but that's not the main aim of a secular university, is it? To change people's worldviews? Isn't a university about exposing yourself to different points of view? And what would you say to that?
not when the schools have changed. We've seen a
Mm,
number of articles over the last few years where if you think of a college liberal arts education, we've made a significant step away from that, and just a general statement, meaning we don't introduce people to Western culture and the disciplines that we used to have in the classics because of trying to get a job, trying to focus on a specific discipline, and so we're not as well rounded. That's part of it. I'd want to throw in, we need to know our schools.
hmm
Just like we're talking here in that area, what they are going to get. I'm thinking of, if you're saying a child going to a Christian school even more, what do you mean by that? Is it a school that
Yeah.
has a
Yeah.
Christian history? Is it a school that has a Christian tone? Is it a school that's decidedly, all right. So there's a continuum there too. You want
Right.
to know your child and
Right.
know the kind of support they're going to get or could make themselves available to when they're
Yeah.
at school.
Yeah.
You can go to a secular school and have an outstanding, Christian support group or a church close by, and they have that discernment too while they're listening to their professors. That's a big
I
concern.
almost wonder in some ways if going to kind of a school that's Christian in name only is worse in some ways than going to a secular university,
It
because
could be.
Absolutely.
at least at a secular university, you're kind of on your guard and saying, look, I need to join in with a campus group. I need to
Yeah.
get connected with a local church's college. I need to make sure. But if it's already supposedly a Christian community, but you have students who aren't really emulating, being disciples of Christ in their lives, it could end up being a worse influence on you in a lot of ways.
Yeah, you
Um,
expect one and get
And
another. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
even a higher level question being, what if it is a Christian university, what theology are they teaching? What doctrine do they actually hold to?
yeah, yeah. And that's a tough one. I almost put that question on here, but I'll just throw it out quickly here. Like, what do you think about going to a Christian university um whose theology is very different from your own? Let's say that you are, a person who, believes more in a study of the Word of God and less experiential, but there's a great program ORU or someplace, that does have, and I'm not saying that to pick on ORU, but, that has a more charismatic trend, right? But you're not a believer who necessarily, goes for that, or even the opposite, right? Somebody who, is, so what do you think about students pursuing Christian education outside of their, their doctrinal statement, I should say?
I
We
would
had a couple.
say
Go
that
ahead. Sure.
it still comes down to how well established are they in the faith. But I do think
Yeah.
that can be really, really helpful at times. I
Mhm.
I can still remember the season in my life where I started reading outside of my what my mentors had written and that kind of thing. There was definitely a time period where I trusted a certain group of people, and I studied under them. I listened to them, in the classroom, and I read their books, and I was very much focused on, I was. It was almost like I felt because I trusted them, I didn't trust myself at that point to start reading, very different views of things. But I did come to a season in my training where I felt more comfortable doing that, and that has greatly enriched my faith, and it also made me better equipped to respond to the bad ideas out there. So I think that's all part of the development, and it still brings the question, the answer. I think it still comes back to individual preparedness, and what is the local church doing, especially, and the family and the
Mhm.
local church. What are they doing to make sure that their kids are well established in the faith? And I'm not. I hope that doesn't sound judgmental or something like that, because we all, recognize the numerous challenges that we face in our
Yeah.
time. Things like the culture of youth ministry. If it's not fun, the kids aren't going to come. The nature of social media and how many voices can come in through your kids' smartphones, and we know all those challenges. But the reality is, when you come to that place, and I'm talking to young people primarily, is you need to make sure that you're well established in the faith, and who better to go to than the people that you trust most, your parents and your church, and before you start, ideally this does happen, from the bar mitzvah age, from like 12 or
Yeah.
13, and that whole stretch there, before you are looking at colleges. Ideally you're going to be well established in the faith during that time. And so when you come to the question of should I go to this Christian college that maybe isn't as Christian as it once was, or should I go to the secular university or whatever, hopefully by that time you have a good handle, that you're well established in the faith, and you know what the challenges are that you're gonna face. But if your reality is, wow, I don't really feel like I'm well established in the faith even though I'm graduating from high school,
Mm.
I would say take that gap year, take a couple of gaps, and latch on to somebody who will help you get well established in the faith
Okay.
before you start making those decisions about where you're going to go to college.
And this is where I hope I don't think I'll get fired for saying something like this, but I'll go for it. Calvary is not the only place where you can do this, guys. Okay, lest you think we're just trying to sell
Mhm.
Calvary. Calvary is part of an association of Christian colleges under the ABHE umbrella. Most of the schools that I've encountered underneath that umbrella, strong. Most of them are Bible colleges, not purely universities, where you can go for a year, get accredited, sound Bible teaching. There are places like Word of Life. There are all sorts of places where you can go and get grounded in the Word in a Bible college, and we see a lot of young people doing that. And we even have some young people who come here from other schools where they've done that, but then they come here because we have a program or a major that they like. I just think that is so smart. Stop. I mean, don't. Is it really worth speeding up your education by 1 or 2 years if you're going to lose your faith by the end of it because you weren't strong enough to go into the thing, right? Take that extra year, whether it's at Calvary or anywhere else. Um, letters from the marketing department will come later. But
No, I think they would agree, Tim. I also think, there's something to be said for the community. So like I've personally had two of my kids that have come through Calvary, and it's a good step from living with your parents and being totally dependent on your parents, even just to get you out of bed at the right times every day. If that's your reality, then a Christian college where the community is a little more predictable, or dare I use the word safe or whatever, but it's a good first step towards adult independence. And I think there's something to be said for that. I know that, personally, we've been very pleased with that aspect of things as a parent, as a father.
Yeah.
Maybe if I can even just kind of, go a different direction a little bit, in that I was not a Christian when I first went to college. I actually accepted Christ my very first semester of college through a campus ministry that reached out to me and started going to events and Bible studies, etc., and built some relationships with them. And so, if it's not and just in the same vein, talking about community, if it has to be a secular university because this is the school that is affordable, close, has your particular degree program or whatever, find that community of believers at that school, in that environment, that you can latch on to, and you can support one another in that particular environment.
Yeah. Mike, I'm going to start with you on this last question. I think you ministry studies guys are going to be just have some rich input here. So for those young people who are coming out of high school and saying, look, I actually don't want to, necessarily go to a secular college because I want to pursue the ministry. I want to be a youth pastor, or in camp ministry, or in international, sort of cross-cultural ministry somewhere. Are there times when those people should not pursue a college education, even when preparing for ministry? I've met people who are self-taught, who have huge libraries. They're constantly reading. They're constantly taking in great content and studying to show themselves approved to God on their own. Right? There are some people doing this kind of thing through church programs. I mean, are there times, Mike, when it's just, you would recommend somebody not necessarily to pursue a Christian college or university or seminary, even when they're going into the ministry?
Yeah, we talked offline beforehand, and I would resonate everything that we said. There are some that are self-taught and are recognized for that, and they work themselves up. Churches are looking for people that are known. That seems to has been a trend over the last number of years, where rather than going through the candidating process and hiring someone from the outside, they look for some of the inside. So they do some self-training, and a formal training is not required. The pastor has ability and time, maybe because of his training, to equip the people for ministry. But what's college about? On one side, there's a credentialing thing. I talked to some people and they'd love to get back in the military. They were in the military. I'm thinking of maybe somebody a little older, not a high school student, and they want to go back as a chaplain. Well, the military, the government has some requirements. You got to have so many graduate hours. You have to be ordained with a organization, and that ordaining organization might have seminary requirements or a degree requirement. So it's not a one fits all, and for sure it's an individual thing. And part of that is what's your goal, and what would the degree help you with? We've seen the trend, and we were talking about this offline. We've seen the trend of churches that are trying to go back to what we had long time ago, where churches were training schools, and every once in a while you see a church that does it. But there are some that we know of that we talked about that are doing that. So there are a lot of options. It depends on the ministry too. I think of some people that, Josh, you'd talk to this, the parachurch organizations where, hey, we're a missions organization. We will give you basic Bible training within our structures, I think of a couple organizations you've talked about that do that. So you don't need to go to a school. You just start working with a missions organization, and they'll make sure you're grounded in the faith, because you're going to go do a support ministry. If you call it support, you're not going to do Bible translation. You need training there. So again, it's a personal thing that every once in a while here at school, over the years that I've been here, I've said, "Why are you here?" And I meant that in a, don't waste your money, because your heart is, and you could do. So again, it was a personal thing, but
so like somebody whose desire is to go to the ministry, but they're just clearly not ready for the discipline of study.
That's part of it. Plus, what do they need it for? If they need the intense time with the languages here, such as what we have at Calvary and the seminary here, you got to find a way to do that.
Yeah.
And usually that is a formal educational opportunity.
Yeah.
I think I want to come at this with from a couple different directions, Tim, and I've seen this play out in my own life, and I've also positively, I've also seen it somewhat negatively play out in the lives of others. And so my own life in particular, my wife and I set out to go to the mission field, and long story really short, that didn't happen. Had I not already gone to college and then on to seminary and got my master's degree, our next step at that point might have been very different. But because I had those credentials, I was able to step right into the role I'm at here at Calvary.
So the credentials give you flexibility, whereas somebody who's saying, "Well, I'm studying in my church,"
it kind of comes back to that conversation of what is your goal, and I almost want to throw out there, what is your backup plan if for some reason you can't achieve your goal? Because our goal was to go to the mission field. That didn't happen. That was never going to happen because of my health. And it's only because I had that credential that I was able to step into something and still, stay in the missions realm through working here at Calvary. On the other side of that, I have seen individuals go through ministry training that was not accredited, didn't get them the credential. And then when they couldn't do that ministry, the question was, now what? And, some of them ended up taking whatever job was available simply so that they could provide for their family and feed themselves. And sometimes we have to do that. I've had to do that too. Sometimes that's what we have to do. But again, it's so important to consider, what is your goal? What are the steps that you need to take to get to that goal? And then even what might I need if for some reason this doesn't pan out?
Yeah. Sean, what are your thoughts about Christian young people trying to pursue ministry, maybe outside of college and through the local church? And I know that's something that you've really given a lot of thought to, and maybe we can even do a preview into a future discussion here, because there are even people within the local church who say that Christian colleges and universities are not the place where people should be training for ministry, that's a local church's job, and I know you have some thoughts on that. I'd love to hear your point of view on this question.
Yeah, I have more than one program of thoughts on this, but my own personal story is that I became a Christian in college, like Josh. I was I didn't grow up in a church. I grew up in what I would consider a false religion, but became a Christian in college, and then I knew that I needed the training. I needed an intense training, and I think that aspect is actually way underrated, and it's rare to get that in a local church. Although I think that should not be rare to get intense training in the local church. In fact, I'm getting a doctorate in church-based theological education. So I believe that the local church should be able to do this. And And so in an ideal world, and not even in an ideal world, in a healthy world, that should be happening. But my own personal story was I chose to go to a seminary, Dallas Theological Seminary, and a couple weeks after I got there, I met a pastor who was planting a church. And so what happened for me was I was getting this intense education through Dallas, but then I also had this mentor, and I didn't even really go looking for that. I didn't even know anything about the Paul Timothy model of leadership development at that time, but that's exactly what I got. God just provided that for me. This pastor that mentored me for literally 14 years added to my education in ways that I could never have imagined as simply a seminary student. So I do think that students shouldn't just think in terms of 4 years and then I have my credentials. I also got to study under Howard Hendricks, and he said, I remember him saying, if I had my way, none of you would leave seminary and become a senior pastor, but that you would find a mentor, and that was exactly what I ended up getting, and so I really think that a Christian college or seminary is a great option if you don't see it as the end all be all. All I need is my credentials.
Right.
If you see it as part of your education, and that your education, you really need a mentor in ministry. I think mentoring is a critical aspect of ministry, because there's so many things that can't be taught in the classroom. There are so many things about character development that are really hard to do in the Christian college environment, and there are ministry skills that you simply can't learn no matter how many papers you write. You're going to have to learn those through experience, and to have a mentor right there with you, giving you those opportunities at the right time and helping you process those opportunities is critical. So I would say a Christian, getting those credentials is good. Like you guys said, you're going to want those credentials. You just are. At some point, you're going to want those credentials, because here's another illustration. A lot of students will get, say, a youth ministry degree, but a lot of guys, when they hit their mid-30s, youth ministry doesn't fit as well for them anymore. And so, the credentials you get, I think, should be diverse enough, or I don't know if that's the right word, but they should allow you to serve in just about any way in ministry, because you really don't know what your path is going to look like. Perhaps, and I've met 60-something youth pastors, but they're rare. So I would recommend getting a general ministry studies degree that will allow you to follow the path and the opportunities that God provides. But don't see Christian college as the education. It's part of your education.
Yeah. This has been a great conversation, and it's time to draw it to a close. But I hope this has been valuable to you listening, whether you are pursuing or thinking about further education, even as an adult, even if it's you're not fresh out of high school, because that's another layer of students that we get a lot, and I know we say non-traditional, but it's becoming more and more traditional for adults to pursue higher education as well, or if you're advising somebody who is considering where to go. And as Sean brought up, this is so important that it's not, I just think you didn't actually say this, but I think this is kind of where you're going with it, and where our next talk may be on this. But it's really important for the church to be partnered and in the conversation with Christian universities, because as part of the body of Christ universal, we need to be supporting each other in the effort of discipling young people and discipling our students. So Well, this has been Calvary Conversations, a ministry of Calvary University. Please join the conversation. I'm sure wherever you're watching this or listening to it, there's a comment box that you can be plugging a question or comment into, or feel free to contact us at the university. Go to calvary.edu to check us out, and we look forward to seeing you next time on Calvary Conversations. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Calvary Conversations, a service of Calvary University in Kansas City, Missouri. We invite you to participate in the conversation by contacting us through the Calvary University website, calvary.edu, or by calling us at 816-322-0110. Join us again next week for another Calvary Conversation.